Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. This is how you kill a Wendigo. My twin sister Janessa was murdered at age 16. I witnessed it like a coward from atop a tree in the forest where it happened. I'd actually blacked out the memory for a while. I knew she was dead, but I couldn't remember how it happened. It wasn't until I tried therapy that it slowly came back to me. I was also reminded of how much my parents used to fight. Our family was planning on a camping trip the day before my sister's death. Before leaving, my parents erupted into another massive fight. Janessa and I had been looking forward to the trip, and once again, our parents' awful communication skills was ruining it before it even began. We snuck out of the house and took a lift to the forest. We left our phones at home, not caring whether our parents would be worried sick. We enjoyed ourselves the first day. I set up our tent, made a fire, had us mores, and did all that stuff one typically associated with camping. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up alone in our tent. Outside, I hear my sister talking to someone. Inquisitive, I opened the tent and saw someone sitting at our now-out campfire who looked just like me. The figure transformed as soon as Janessa realized it wasn't me. Together we ran off, that thing rushing after us with heavy steps. I was faster than my sister and a bit more athletic. I grabbed onto a tree branch and climbed up a tree. Janessa was not so lucky. I watched it happen. I watched that thing tear my sister to pieces. I'm still haunted by her screams. I also understand now why she always appears badly mutilated in my nightmares. I stayed up in that tree overnight, my sister's corpse lying in the leaves, her remaining eye always staring up at me. While in therapy, there was a moment when I suddenly recalled the hallucination I had the morning after my sister's death. I thought I saw her corpse clawing at the tree where I hid. She wanted me to come down and join her. It caused me to panic and cry out. A couple of men who had been camping in the area heard my screams, and at last I was rescued. My parents don't argue anymore. I hardly see them at all anymore since my sister's death. We're an upper-middle-class family. Over the last couple of years, my parents have frequently gone on vacations. They don't tell me where, and I never ask. I usually just wake up and find out they've left yet again. I'm out of high school now, and I have no career path yet. I've only really had one thing on my mind since I remembered what killed Janessa. Now I'm returning to the forest where she died. Now I'm going to go after the thing that killed her. I've been preparing for this, and if it is a Wendigo like I've suspected, then I'm more than ready to take my revenge. This is how I'm doing it. I took a lift again. Had the driver known what I was carrying in my bags, I doubt they would have let me in. As I sat there, the realization of what I was doing grew heavily on me. What the hell am I doing? I've been talking myself up for the last couple of years. As much as I want a glorious victory, the closer I've come to this day, the more I daydream about dying the same way Janessa did. As angry as I am with my parents, I don't think they deserve to lose their only remaining child. But I just can't move on knowing that thing is still out there. My legs were as dense as gold once I tried to exit the cab. The driver watched awkwardly as I struggled to pull myself out while putting on my backpack and working to carry the other supplies. Why was I doing this alone? I don't want anyone else getting hurt in this, I think was my reasoning. But God, I wish I wasn't out here doing this alone. With each step I took into the forest, the more the terror numbed. I was in the domain of the Wendigo now. I wasn't entirely sure how much of the information about them was real. I knew they could change their appearance. I know that their true form is just like the drawings people have made. There's no way to be an expert on these things unless you've actually dealt with one. I'm still not sure why it decided not to come after me. Based on its size, I doubt it would have had any difficulty. Instead, I'm still alive and crazy enough to come back and pick a fight. As I set up camp, I found myself jumping at the sound of any bird call or movement from a nearby animal. The way I hammered in my tent, I knew I was calling attention to myself. In my left pants pocket was a gun. Like werewolves, I'd heard that silver bullets were necessary to kill Wendigos. What if I'm wrong? The thought had been with me ever since I'd stepped foot back into these woods. I stopped frequently while setting up. Behind nearby tree, I was almost certain I could see someone watching me and then hiding behind it again. I didn't bother to walk over and check it out. I finished up my tent and made up my sleeping bag inside. As I did this, I heard calls that sounded almost human off in the distance. It probably knew I was here. The minutes went by slowly, but soon dusk set upon the forest. I built a fire like the one Janessa and I had made. I roasted 2 marshmallows. Despite her absence, I made a s'more for her as well, resting it on a sizable rock near the fire. As I ate it, I thought about our last night together. All things considered, it was pleasant. Being twins, we had moments where we'd gotten into arguments like our parents. We'd fought one another. We had our problems. But that night had been pleasant. I'd actually been glad we decided to camp without our parents. As frightened as I still was, I felt a warmth not from the fire. A sense of calm overcame me as my memories were suddenly flooded with the good times Janessa and I had. The good times were not for long. I could hear footsteps not far behind me. Jeremy. I could never forget that voice. It sounded just like Janessa, but I knew it wasn't her. For some reason, I felt compelled to sit there calmly. As it approached, I could tell it was going over to take a seat at the rock where I'd left the s'more. I glanced delicately to my right. I watched as a figure that looked almost identical to the Janessa I remembered pick up the s'more and take a bite. "That's not yours." I surprised myself blurting that out. The fake Janessa ignored me, continuing to scarf it down. My terror turned to anger. The thing responsible for my sister's death was standing right next to me, mocking my grief. I didn't wait for it to finish. I pulled out my gun and pointed it directly at the figure. Before I could fire, the creature jumped to the left and turned around. I was struck with paralysis when I saw the mutilated face of my sister's corpse staring back at me. "I'm trapped, Jeremy." I struggled to keep aim. How dare that thing pretend to be her? It won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. We could be together again. It's so much nicer than going home to an empty house and unloving parents. She held her hand out to me. "Trust me, brother. Please." My trigger finger felt as though struck with a serious case of arthritis. Janessa took a step towards me. "Wait, no. It's not Janessa. Why did I suddenly forget that? Feed the forest with me, Jeremy. It's so much better being dead. PPR, prove it." At last I pulled the trigger. The creature hollered in pain as it fell to the ground. I'd hit a lung, which wouldn't be enough. I aimed the gun at its heart, but failed to pull the trigger as it rolled over and jumped back to its feet. Within seconds, it transformed from a corpse of my sister to its massive, dark, skeletal form with massive antlers. My mind was caught between fight and flight. I stood there aiming my gun, but desperately wanted to flee. As it rushed towards me, I chose the later option. I rushed over to the bag I'd left near the tent. Inside was a weapon I'd built myself. As I rushed over, I could tell I wasn't going to be able to outrun it. I fired another shot. The bullet lodged itself inside the neck of the beast. It cried out once more, buying me a bit of time to get to the bag. Why did I have it zipped up? As I tried to open it, The Wendigo rushed towards me again. Just like on the day of Janessa's death, I ran from the campsite, further into the forest. History was repeating itself. I was going to fail to avenge my sister. My parents were going to lose their last remaining child, all because I couldn't let this go. After at least several minutes, I'd somehow managed to keep outrunning it. I refused to slow down and look behind my shoulder. As I kept running, I noticed that I'd gone in some sort of circle. Up ahead of me was the campsite. I had a chance to grab the bag and pulled out the weapon. The closer I came to the campsite, the louder the Wendigo's footsteps became. I could almost feel the wind as the creature tried to claw at me. Once I reached the campsite, I put my hand out, clutching the bag. It felt like almost too great a risk to put my gun back in my pocket, but I needed free to pull out the weapon. I managed to do just that and used my left hand to pull out a long metal spike. I'd build it in such a way as to have the spike shoot out at the push of a button. The Wendigo wasn't going to slow down until it had me. I had no choice. I had to turn around. I had to have perfect timing. I had to collect my debt from the creature that took my twin sister. Chew on this? I turned around, pressing the button that shot the spike out. Less than a foot from my face was the Wendigo, its cries so loud my ears hurt and began to ring. I'd done it. The spike had pierced the heart. Silver. Weakly, the Wendigo tried to swipe at me, but somehow lacked the strength. The next part was a gamble. I pulled out my gun and shot it in the head. It wasn't going to be enough to end the Wendigo, assuming what I'd read up was correct. I rushed back over to where I dropped my bag. Inside was a silver axe I'd also designed myself. When I returned, the creature was still conscious, letting out continuous, agonizing cries. I felt no sympathy. I hacked away at its wrists first. Its claws were the biggest threat, and I wanted them gone. Despite the weight lifting I'd been doing, it took over a dozen hacks to remove the first long-fingered hand. I pulled out my gun and shot it again in the head. It subdued the creature long enough for me to remove the second hand, and then I began on its head. As it began waking up again, I found myself screaming at the creature. I demanded it stay dead, calling it every insulting name that came to mind. Once I'd hacked most of the way through its head, I pulled it off. I kicked it a couple of feet away. The Wendigo no longer moved. It took over an hour, but I'd managed to put each limb, the head, and torso in the trash bags I brought along. One by one, I carried them back to the campsite. I lit another fire, burning each bag. It took until dawn for me to burn the body. I left the torso for last. It was a struggle, but I managed to remove the heart, rip it to pieces, and placed it in a silver box. After locking it, I looked around the site and decided to leave everything except my gun and the box behind. I was never particularly religious, but in the months leading up to my fight, I'd gotten to know a priest at a church in my area called Street Alphonsus. Luckily for me, he was there when I arrived with the silver box. His face went several shades paler when I showed it to him. Nevertheless, he escorted me to the back of the church with a pair of shovels and helped me bury it. Once done, I sat there, suddenly flooded with overwhelming emotions. I did it. The Wendigo had been slain. I'd done it. My sister's killer was dead. Its body was burned, its heart in pieces and buried. "Janessa!" I cried out. I kept my promise. I killed it. The Wendigo can't get anyone else. It won't kill anyone else. I placed my lowered head in my hands and continued to cry. "I'm sorry I wasn't braver before." I whimpered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't stronger before." I placed some flowers on my sister's grave an hour later. I talked to her tombstone as though she was there listening. I'd like to believe she was, and that she was pleased with my accomplishment. Afterwards, I returned home and slept through the day and all night. Once morning came, I heard some noise downstairs. I went down to see that my parents were home and sitting down to breakfast. They stopped and looked over at me, saying nothing. I walked over and pulled up a seat. I had no appetite at all. "How was your trip? Where did you guys go?" My parents exchanged looks before my father replied. "We went out west to visit your aunt and uncle." "Did you enjoy it?" I had difficulty keeping my chin from quivering as I lowered my head again. "Jeremy, sweetie, what's wrong?" Both my mother and my father got up and came over to me. "Why do you keep leaving me alone? God damn it. I'm the only kid you have left. Don't you give a fuck about me?" They hugged me tightly, offering apologies. I could have sworn I felt another pair of hands on my shoulders. Their light touch was the most comforting of all. I really hope Janessa is proud of me. But a new task was ahead of me now. A harder task, perhaps. I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile with my parents. Our family had been broken long before her death. We'll never be whole again, but I know with some effort we can be better than this. I hope she can continue to give me the strength to put myself together as I progress into adulthood. Second story, The Thing in the Woods. I've been dying to tell this story, though I know no one is bound to believe me. I don't even want to tell my parents in fear that they'll stare at me in disbelief and think that I'm crazy. So, here I am, anonymously telling it to a group of strangers in hopes that someone will believe me and give me some peace of mind. It started out a few months ago when we moved into our new home. I grew up in a rural community, but there were plenty of neighbors and mostly fields around. No woods. Given that I am the youngest child, my parent waited until I was done with high school to move, as to not affect my already established life. Although we had always lived in a small, rural community, my parents were ready for something a little more secluded, something with a lot of acreage, woods, and a place to shoot. They put my childhood home up on the market and soon found their dream home, which is where I am currently and desperately writing this story. The house and the property are beautiful. It's a large, turn-of-the-century house facing 15 acres of land, the majority of which are woods and a nice half-acre pond. The best part, or so I thought, is that there are no neighbors within a mile of us. At first, I really enjoyed it. Being out in the woods was very much a cathartic experience for me. It helped shed the stresses of school and studying. Being among the tall trees and the surrounding nature made all of my problems seem totally insignificant, so I made a habit of going on regular walks through the woods. As the weeks went on, I started noticing strange things as I went on my walks. I would find partially eaten deer scattered along the leaf-littered ground, accompanied by a putrid, rotting smell, which I attributed to the carcass in front of me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was probably coyotes, I would tell myself. Other than that, I thought nothing of it, but starting carrying a gun with me on my walks in case I encountered the animal that was responsible for the carnage I saw in front of me. As the days went on, I started noticing more and more mutilated deer scattered across the floor of the woods, still accompanied by the rotting smell, which I again attributed to the animals. If the increasing number of mutilations weren't enough, I started to notice a change in the sounds coming out of the woods. What was once a cacophony of sounds was now mostly dead silence, minus the low, guttural growl that seemed to be becoming more prevalent, more pronounced, and more insidious each day. By this point, I had stopped going on my little walks. Gun or no gun, I didn't want to risk the chances of facing whatever was causing these events. That being said, my curiosity eventually got the best of me one night as I heard its growls. I decided that I was going to go get a trail cam and set it up out in the woods the following day, in hopes of finally seeing what was out there. The next evening, after work, I gathered up what little courage I had left, and, camera in hand, went walking out into the very woods I had promised myself I would stay out of. I never did get to set up the trail cam. I lost it somewhere in the woods while I was in a panic, running for my life. I made it about 100 yards past the tree lines into the woods, where I decided to stop and set up the camera. I thought it was a good place to set it up, and quite frankly, I was too scared to go any further. After all, I wanted to spend as little time out there as possible given the ongoing events, and the fact that it would be dark soon didn't help. Already on edge, every creak of the wood and every crunch in the leaves sent me into a panic. Rushing to set the camera up, I drop it, sending it to the leaf-ridden ground with a thud. Murmuring under my breath, cursing myself for being out there, I bent down to pick the camera up when I started to smell that putrid smell of rotting flesh again. I carefully looked around, checking my surroundings to see if anything was out there. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see anything. Just as I was finishing picking my supplies off of the ground, I heard that low, guttural growl again, as well as the snap of a branch to my right. I quickly turned, seeing a human-like creature standing there, staring at me. I was completely frozen with fear. It had human features, standing on two legs, and it had feet and hands. The two things that threw me off, however, was the fact that its skin was charred black, as if it had been burned in a fire, and most disturbingly, it had no upper or lower lips. Although mostly bald, a few thin, straggling hairs stuck every which way out of its scalp. Its sharp teeth were hanging out like hypodermic needles. With the absence of lips, its raw, red gums hung out in the open. Thick strings of what appeared to be saliva dripped off of its chin in a persistent stream. For one single brief moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I quickly went through options on what to do. There were really only two viable options. Either stay exactly how I was and get attacked and most likely killed by this thing, or I could get the fuck out of there. I chose the latter. I quickly scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, throwing my camera, in vain, at the creature behind me. In the chaos of what had just occurred, I found myself to be momentarily lost after running in what I thought was the right direction for what felt like 20 minutes, but I'm sure it was only 30 seconds. Looking around and not seeing the spawn of hell that I had just encountered, I stopped to collect myself and try to find a way back to the house. I finally decided on the general direction in which I should head, when I heard a commotion that almost sounded like a horse pounding its hooves on the dirt. I looked behind me and saw that thing, whatever it was, running at me on all fours, mucus like spit flying out of the corners of its mouth like a rabid dog. I ran as quickly as I possibly could, without daring to look behind me. Although I would not look at it, I could hear it galloping behind me and smell its rotted flesh. Tears ran down my eyes, as I thought that there was no way possible to make it out of the woods alive, when I finally saw the lights of my house out of the clearing. Using what little adrenaline I had left to sprint the 200 yards or so to my back porch, I quickly opened the door and slammed it shut, not daring to look out the window. It's been about a month now since that happened. I haven't told anyone, and I will not dare to go back out in those woods. I've been doing a lot of research to see if I could find any clues as to what that thing might have been. I've exhausted myself, but I think I may have come to a conclusion. The closest thing I could find was possibly a skinwalker. I know my sighting doesn't entirely match up with the stories I've heard, but it's the closest thing I've found. Third story. Tall creatures in the woods. A few weeks back, I posted on a thread about rural hauntings, cryptid encounters, and folklore. I figured this would be a good place to post a little more, and those who were interested in the documentary, it's still in production. But getting to the encounters, we are from a small town in southern Ohio, about an hour east of Cincinnati. This town has been plagued with people dying young, and in some pretty gruesome ways. Google Cheryl Fossil as an example. Many believe that this is caused by, or the cause of, activity around the area. There is a section of woods that seems to have concentrated activity throughout. The woods in question are surrounded by 2 churches, a hospital, and an area of housing. Now, as full disclosure, things do not happen every time we go in, but when things do happen, things happen off of the charts. The most common things that we've experienced are what we've dubbed the geeks. We call these things geeks because they're tall, sometimes 12 feet from toe to crown, and gangly and move awkwardly, although move between trees swiftly. They never present themselves outwardly, only glimpses of them as they move between trees. The scariest thing about them, however, is the sound right before they start moving, almost like a deep groan. The second that I wanted to talk about is Hydra. Only one of us have seen this thing, and so far there has been only one witnessed. It is a small primate-like creature with a face like a hideous woman, a chimpanzee body, long greasy black hair, and boils on its back. Blood-red boils. The member of our group who had encountered this thing refuses to tell us what Hydra had spoken to him about. These are some of the things that we've encountered. We are working on a documentary about what's happened in this area and the town itself. I will keep everyone who is interested updated on the findings and eventual release of the documentary itself. If anyone has any similar experiences, I would love to hear about them. 4th story. I saw a Wendigo. So me and my sister were bored one day and decided to go ghost hunting, something me and a few family members do a lot. We decided to go to a few different places armed with a spirit box around our area. We had a few little responses to questions or just noises that made little to no sense. We decided to go to one of the oldest graveyards in the county that just so happened to be a few roads over from my mother's house. We get there, set up, turn on the spirit box, and wait. Almost as soon as we turn on the spirit box, it starts going crazy. It starts with just repeating hello over and over again, then as clear as anything says my sister's name in my dad's voice. We look at each other in disbelief, then it does it again. At this point, I tune out. I do not know why, but I just go blank, like my body is frozen, but I can look around. I can faintly hear my sister asking questions and the spirit box replying. As I was looking around, I see something moving out the corner of my eye. So me being the dumbass, I stupidly look right at it, and what I saw was a brown, almost skeletal creature. It was like its skin was tight to its bones. It was creeping through the trees surrounding the graveyard. I looked away before I could look at its face. I did not want to see it. In one motion, I stood up and turned toward the exit. My sister followed me without asking what happened, just switched off the SB, and then we left. I waited until we were away from the graveyard to explain what I had just seen, and we both knew what it was. We got back to our mother's house and explained everything to her. Needless to say, she was freaked out. After a while, we had decided to do another spirit box session in the house with our mother. It was quiet for a few minutes until it said my older brother's name, who was not there at the time. Then it switched to his voice, which is very distinctive. And it kept repeating, "Mum, help me, mum, help me," and it sounded distressed. At this point, we turned off the spirit box. I have had a lot. Like an unnatural amount of spirit encounters, but never anything like this. 5th story. Possible Wendigo encounter. So last night, I awoke at around 3 a.m. after going to bed at 12. I went to get some water and sat back down on my bed, staring out my window. I live in a heavily wooded area in New York State, so hopefully that helps set the scene a little. So I was looking out my window, and there are many trees visible outside my window. As my house is on a cliffside, I am kind of at the middle of the 30-foot tall trees. The window I was looking out overlooked the cliff, and the trees are right in front of me. The moonlight illuminated something on one of the trees. It was a humanoid-like figure, and its features were barely visible through the darkness. I looked at it in fear, as it was about 7 feet tall, but appeared to be crouched down on the sturdy branch. After about 10 seconds, it turned its head and looked at me. Its eyes were red, and it stared at me for about another 10 seconds, and then it looked like it fell off the branch. I rushed to the window to see what had happened to the thing, but it took off into the bushes and greenery of the forest floor. It moved fast. I saw the bushes moving as it got further away in the moonlight. I'd like to know if anyone knows what this creature was. I believe in the paranormal, but I haven't yet had any encounters with anything besides this. I did some shallow research and believe what I saw was possibly a Wendigo, although I'm still not sure at all. If you think you know anything, please reach out to me. 6th story. There's a hatch in the middle of the woods. It was old, older than God, older than the 100-foot pines that towered above. It looked like a submarine hatch, sitting on a low concrete rise planted firmly in the forest floor. It wore a tight beard of pine needles over a rusted wheel handle with bolts the size of apples. It took both of us to get the handle to turn. Metal groaned in protest, screamed as it shaved away the layer of rust that had welded it shut. Together we pulled the lid open. It was heavy, heavier than a house. Then it split back on its hinge with a sigh of stale air. Darkness seemed to spill out of the hatchway, like it had been bottled up for eons and was now ready to infect the world. It looked as though a great metal mouth had opened up in the forest floor. A predator's mouth, starving and ready to feed. We peered down. A service ladder of rebar-like rungs descended the dark concrete bore into the great unknown. Hazy, overcast sunlight fought the darkness and lost, penetrating a meager 5 feet before shadow claimed the hole for its own. Sammy found a rock that looked like a cat's head, negotiated it over the hatch, and dropped it down. It whistled off into darkness. We waited, 2 teenage girls in the woods of Washington, listening for a sound that never came, that rock hitting the bottom. I was spending a month of summer with my cousin Sammy at our grandma's place up in northern Washington. It was a gray, unsunny July. I'd only been there a day, but a kingdom of storm clouds had rolled in off the ocean and pitched camp over our corner of Washington, issuing unto it low, endless drizzle that left the world soggy and awful. Today, however, the clouds had parted, peeling back in a blast of sunlight, and leaving Sammy and I to our daily dose of mischief, 2 purloined cigarettes. With the smokes in hand, we cut out through the trees behind Grandma's house in search of someplace suitably grunge to light up. We followed a thin vein of hiking trail, eventually breaking off on our own through the wide, primordial riot of woods, not entirely claustrophobic, but dense enough that the massive pines would be warring for root space. We had been off the trail for no more than 10 minutes when Sammy called out to me, indicating the closed hatch that would eventually swallow us whole. We brushed away a thin skeleton of branches, a great bed of moss, a tangle of brush to finally unearth the thing that resembled something city workers in bright orange vests might descend to access a gas main, which was odd because it bore no markings to denote its origin, not even warnings with penal codes to dissuade would-be vandals. It was anonymous and disconcerting, like its lack of designation meant it didn't belong, like it was an interloper. Sammy had asked me something. I looked up at her. What? What is it? She repeated, curious gaze pinned on the hatch. I don't know, I told her. I don't know what it is. I knew it was old, older than God, older than the 100-foot pines that towered above. The hatch was open and Sammy wanted to go down. Come on, Laney, she groaned. It'll be fun. We'll poke around, take some shots for our feeds. I'm not on that shit, I shot back. Social media is the death of rational thought. True, she grumbled. But what are we supposed to do? Hang out with Grandma all day and watch Rebel Without a Cause with commercials? I took a long, pensive drag on the stale Winston, not wanting to admit that I was kind of terrified. Not only was I worried about the hatch lid slamming on us, trapping us in, but the thought of climbing down that shadowy ladder, of disappearing into the Earth's dark, quiet belly, made me want to vomit. Luckily, I didn't have to make any excuses. It started to rain. Shit, Sammy hissed as the first spray of drizzle fell in gray sheets. Help me close it. Don't want it to flood. The rain was a fine mist, nothing more than a sneeze, and I doubted very much if it would flood, but I was more than happy to help her seal off that dark orifice. We did, together, before heading back through the trees, leaving the hatch behind. We were soaked through by the time we made it back to Grandma's. She fixed us plates of hot lasagna, and we all watched James Dean's Effortless Cool and Rebel. With the commercials, my grandma's house was not unimpressive. It was a two-story Victorian rising in a collage of faded red and white from a wide lot of crabgrass, the open property hemmed by a wrought iron fence, all of it seemingly weighed down by 100 years of history. It looked like something out of a Tim Burton movie, a Gothic manor surrounded by woods, a lone raft stranded in a sea of trees. I was staying in my dad's old digs, a mess of ancient band posters and records, breezy punk stuff like the Gun Club and the Wipers. Despite all the vinyl, I was plugged into Spotify, and Bowie was wailing Moonage Daydream when Sammy slipped in, face bright with mischief. "Come on," she said in an excited, breathy whisper. "Let's go." It was late. Dark and late. I thought she had gone to bed. But she claimed a spot on the edge of my bed, charged with nervous energy. I lost my headphones and shifted to look at her, her eyes wide and excited. "What? Go." I screwed my face into a confused knot. The thing, the hole in the ground, the mention of the hatch, the mouth, made my skin crawl. "What?" I said. "No way. It's like midnight." "It's atmospheric," she countered. "It's pitch dark out. So? We'll vlog it or something. Record it." "I don't know, it'll be fun." I groaned, shook my head. "No fucking way." "Then I'll go without you," Sammy huffed. "Into the hole? In the middle of the night?" "Yup. Totally alone. So if I get molested by subdwelling mutates, it's on you. Cost you the older cousin and all." "Don't be a bitch," I said, feeling my cheeks flare up. She smiled, a dimple forming beside her mouth, clearly amused at having manipulated me into a stalemate of mutually assured destruction. I was caught. Either I go with her and keep her in check, or I let her go alone and something might happen. She was 15, only a year younger than me, but impulsive and brash, and it wouldn't surprise me if she got hurt. I could claim ignorance, but if something happened, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Despite being just cousins, we had always been close, always been more like sisters than anything else. Sammy could drive me up the wall, but I still loved her, and I could see in her eyes that she wouldn't be swayed. I blew another long sigh, pushed myself off the bed, shrugged on my black windbreaker. "Let's get some fucking flashlights," I said. I prayed for rain I knew wouldn't come. The clouds had burned off in the moonlight, leaving the heavens bright and clear. We had found a set of headlamps in Grandma's junk drawer and navigated the low woods by the watery beams they provided. I had also taken an old Swiss Army knife. It was made of rust and looked like it had survived the Great War, but I took it just in case. I was hoping I wouldn't need it, hoping we wouldn't find the hatch, hoping it would be lost in the riot of trees. But something deep down, a high tickle in the deepest wrinkles of my soul, told me we would find it. And we did. Almost immediately, it resolved out of the darkness, a small brutalist platform rising out of the still damp soil. Had it been so close before? It must have been. Must have. Sammy was recording us with her phone, posting them on Instagram or something. Who knows? My vision had whittled down to a dizzying pinprick, and all I could hear was the hot rush of blood pounding through my ears. I helped her tug open the hatch, vaguely heard myself ask if she really wanted to do this. "Course I do," she said with a tight smile as she pocketed her phone. "It'll be exciting." Then she mounted the ladder and started off down the hatch. That sound only could have been made by the hatch lid slamming shut. We had been climbing down the narrow bore for 5 minutes, each rung burning with a hot metal freeze that nibbled through flesh and seemed to lick at the bone, when there had been a loud, metallic report. Thunk! We both froze on the ladder, Sammy just below me, panting like a tired dog. "What was that?" I whispered, hauling stale air through my aching lungs. "YR," Sammy started in her normal voice, before dropping in an octave. "Why are you whispering? What was that?" I asked again, but I didn't have to ask. I already knew. She did, too. I heard the growing scuffle of her climbing back up the ladder. I started too, one white-hot rung after the next, my palms burning, my heart beating its angry fist against my ribs. The climb up was hard. My body seemed to weigh too much, like each limb was encased in lead as I pulled myself up, nearing what I knew I'd find. And I was right. The hatch was closed. I pounded on it, screamed, knowing that the only ones to hear would be us. I chipped away at it with the army knife to no avail. We tried our phones, first mine, then Sammy's, pressing the devices to the lid's rough, rusted skin. No reception. Nothing but the mouth. No one but us, 2 teenage girls, her with red hair, me with brown, trapped in an awful ladder with nowhere to go but down. "I don't like this," Sammy croaked. She sounded so young, like a little girl clutching her teddy bear after an especially dreadful nightmare. I didn't like it either. It was wrong. It was so wrong. It was a pyramid of rocks. The climb down the ladder had been impossible. Time fell away, shifting into a dull blur that didn't much matter. All that mattered was finding your footing as you lowered yourself down, rung after rung, step after step. It might have been an hour or 10, but a while later, a long while, we hit a wide concrete room. It was about the size of your average backyard. The ceiling low, unblemished spare the circular opening through which the ladder ran. Shadows shifted and danced in black relief as we played our headlights across the dark space. On the wall opposite the ladder stood a wide, ruined opening. Nothing but darkness beyond it. The massive bank vault-style door that had once filled it sat in a twisted, broken heap nearby, torn free of its hinges by something that was disturbing. It sent a sudden flood of hot dread filling my guts like boiling water. But what was worse was the pyramid. It stood in the center of the room like a shitty roadside art sculpture, a painstaking pyramid fashioned out of countless rocks. I knew where those stones had come from. Sammy did too. They had been dropped from the above by people like us. Hundreds of them, thousands, sacrificed to the darkness of the earth. The mouth. I knew because topping the pyramid like a Christmas tree star was the rock Sammy had dropped earlier. The exact same one, no doubt about it, tucked carefully atop the mountain of stones. Placed there by someone, something. A high trembling sound like an animal in a snare filled the room as the reality of the situation hit Sammy. She had started to cry. She was losing it, unraveling at the seams. Sitting on the floor, knees to her chest, rocking and sobbing and apologizing for bringing me down here. We had to move. My whole body was one big screaming ache, and if we let exhaustion ease its warm blanket over our shoulders, we'd never get going. I sought air through my lungs and boiled it into authority. "We have to go," I said. She sniffled. "What?" Her voice was nasally. She raised a trembling finger to the cracked entryway across the room. "Through there?" I nodded, struck one of the matches I still had from the cigarettes. The flame wavered, guttered as a breeze tugged at it. "There's a breeze," I said. "Airflow." "Another way out?" She sniffled, shook her head. "No, no way. I say we wait here. Wait for someone to open the hatch." "No one knows we're down here," I reminded her. "No one? But what if?" She started, looking at the pyramid of rocks. She lowered her voice, a hoarse whisper. "What if the thing that is in there, where else would it be?" I thought, but I didn't say that. She was close to catatonia, and I needed her in motion. "We have nowhere else to go," I said. "Nowhere." She looked at me, her face pale and ghostly in the light of my headlamp. Her eyes were puffy, red, bright with terror. Then she summoned her courage like one with a lungful of air and nodded. I hauled her to her feet, and we started off through the doorway. "There's someone following us," Sammy said in a choked whisper. The entryway had fed us into an underground hospital. It was abandoned, left to rot beneath the earth. A maze of scarred linoleum hallways, moldering gurneys with thick leather straps, blown-out doorways with padded rooms beyond. No, not a hospital, an asylum, or a laboratory, a kind of psycho mixture of both. Its construction spoke of a time before technology and the advancement of human rights. Yellowed walls and popcorn ceilings were shredded, torn to ribbons, like a feral something had been set loose. Rusty smears of dried blood textured the white darkness here and there. It was awful. Each footfall, each pull of breath, all sounds seemed to echo, clang, reverberate through the white walls of this underground labyrinth. It was like a nightmarish Escher painting. It was the mouth. Up until then, we had been negotiating slowly, rounding corners, finding more shadow-soaked hallways, passing an overturned reception desk, more padded cells, driven forth by terror and primal survival instinct. Then Sammy had whispered in my ear, her breath hot, her voice hoarse with terror. "There's someone following us." I froze. A cold infection of goosebumps went sprouting up over my body. My lungs were tight, empty of air. My heart was pounding with icy fear. I turned slowly, not wanting to make a sound, afraid that if I did it might make the someone real. She must have imagined it. There was no one. Then I saw the eyes. Two dull, milky pinpricks hovering just outside the light of our headlamps. They were head level, higher than head level, unblinking, hovering and watching. Eyes. Sammy's body was right up against mine. She was wound up like an over-torqued screw. Terror radiated from her in hot waves. I could feel fear beating through her veins. Ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. The eyes moved so suddenly that both of us screamed. They surged forward without any warning, rushed at us, the thing, the something, the awful subdwelling mutate that would devour our hot intestines while we were still shrieking. I saw its crooked, emaciated silhouette lumbering and lurching toward us, a tall, broken thing, its arms stick-like and so impossibly thin. Those glowing blind eyes set into a narrow, malformed head, as molded and precise as a canine skull. Then the creature hit our pool of light and the eyeballs popped out of thin air, like the light had banished that thing, leaving only two marbles which clattered down, hit the floor, bounced, and rolled to our feet. They stared up at us, pale, seeing and somehow blasphemous. Sammy and I jerked back and bolted like the wind. My cousin screamed and yanked me back just as solid ground dropped out beneath me. We had been in a blind rush, a blur of hallways scrolling by, passing padded cells with shadows that moved within them, when the floor had suddenly stopped being. Sammy grabbed my shirt and jerked me back just as I went tumbling out over the sudden chasm. After a gut-wrenching second of uncertainty, I found myself on solid ground, looking down at the vast, empty nothingness. There was a 20-foot canyon separating this side from the other, a thin, splintery plank board running across it. It looked like someone had shoveled out a massive, crude pit in the hallway of the underground nightmare. We peered down, hauling air through broken lungs, hearts pounding, not sure what we were seeing. A solid knot of arms and legs, interwoven and laced together, filled out the bottom of the abyss. They were gray, broken, decayed, torn flesh hung from bone, massive boils filled with hot pus-textured rotting skin. But this wasn't a shallow grave, and they weren't the departed. As soon as our light hit them, they slithered apart, breaking away like a hive of snakes under the burning heat of a magnifying glass. Dreadful heads, pained and drawn in agony, recoiled from the light, broken. Human-like things forcing themselves off in a shadow to reclaim what little salvation they had. They hissed and moaned and chuckled with insane humor, like condemned souls cast from heaven, forever banished to this pit of darkness for an existence of raw pain. "Oh my God," Sammy croaked. "Oh my God." But there was no God in this place. It was a great blasphemy born from the sin of the unrighteous. It was awesome and awful. It was... A low sound came from behind us, tucked into the cacophony of torment. Sammy didn't hear it, too taken with the pit of the damned. I slowly turned, my heart fluttering with icy dread, my stomach knotting in on itself. But the hallway behind us was empty. I blew a relieved sigh. The giant meat spider exploded out of the darkness with a throaty screech, a blur of limbs carrying it across the scuffed ceiling. But they weren't limbs. They were human arms and legs. I gasped as it rattled down the wall, hissing and pulsing with hideous life as it joined the floor and surged forward. It bubbled into the light, a nightmarish set of conjoined twins, two separate androgynous entities melded together, appendages beginning where others ended, scraps of face in all the wrong places. Eyeballs and noses and mouths all scattered about its lumpy, fleshy form. It was a nightmare of terrible industry, and its head, much like a spider's, was bulbous and truly heinous. Patches of hair textured its lumpy scalp above rows of eyeballs and a wide mouth of thick razor teeth. Sammy turned, screamed, and stepped back. It was instinctive, a single misplaced move that sent her out over empty space. She reached out for me, her fingertips skimming my arm as she issued a surprised "oh." Then she was gone, plummeting into the sea of souls, swallowed by the mass of forgotten bodies. I heard her shriek, heard her wail in bright agony as those things tore her limb for limb, picking her apart like a mean kid with a stunned fly. Then I looked up, and a fleshy mass of teeth and eyes and hatred was atop me. The meat spider tore me down into darkness. I awoke in a biblical spiderweb to the reek of death. It was a dark, sticky place, hot with the stench of dead things. The smell flooded my lungs, burned my nose and eyes. I looked around, my eyes adjusting to the gloomy haze. I'd lost my headlamp. Fibrous white nets resolved out of the darkness, stretching to and fro like an entropic masterpiece, all of it seemingly random and oddly beautiful in its precision. An incredible tapestry of psycho nature. Massive cocooned lumps textured the space, scattered throughout the nest like sleeping beauties. They were prey, and so was I. I couldn't move. I was melted to a wall of webbing by a spray of fiber, not entirely cocooned, but imprisoned in a straitjacket of dreadful string. I tried to scream, but my mouth was gagged with a shred of webbing. I issued a low, muffled shriek, the sound of despair. Then the entire formation began to tremble with a low vibration. I heard a tight hiss, saw a dark shape skitter by. The meat spider mounted the nearest cocoon and tore into it with its terrible human-like arms, craning its lumpy head to suck meat from bone. I heard congested slurping, things tearing, flesh and bone snapping apart. It was feeding, and it would come for me next. I slowly began to struggle, trying to work some slack into my binds. But they held firm. Held firm. I felt something firm in my back pocket. I patted it desperately. The Swiss Army knife. I worked it out, popped the blade as the noise of feeding slowed, as the awful meat spider shredded its fill from one of its victims. I eased the rusty blade through the webbing and began to saw. It was like cutting through canvas. The web behind me instantly began to slacken, splitting apart, losing its tension as, oh God, oh no. The meat spider lunged, drenched in still hot blood, moving with that deliberate speed afforded only to creepy crawlies. It was coming for me, arms and legs pumping, its misshapen form throbbing with terrible heat. I worked the Swiss Army knife harder, faster, hacking away blindly, hatcheting apart the web holding me captive. And I could smell it, oh God, the reek of ancient rot, of things dead and decayed and hate, and it was here. Oh God, it was here. The meat spider lunged. For a terrifying instant all I saw were eyes and teeth. There was a horrible intelligence in those eyes, an awful cunning that reminded me so much of the dead-eyed stare of serial killers in court. Then the web split beneath me, and I fell. A second later, and I would have been girl meat. Instead, I was tumbling down, plummeting like a stone, the ground black and solid and rushing toward me. It slammed into me like a freight train, and I crumpled like a bird. It wasn't solid ground. It was an angry rush of water. A river tumbled and heaved through a rocky canyon. The rapids frothed like a rabid dog, whipping me around like a rag doll in the hands of a brat. I snapped this way and that, barking my arms and legs and brain off lips of rock that seemed to bite out at me. Water that reeked of rotten gasoline and the thousands of dead things it had washed away flooded my mouth, filled my lungs. I choked and fought and tumbled downstream until blackness expanded. I awoke in a drain pipe to the first light of dawn. It painted strange shapes on the curved concrete bore in which I was delivered. I folded over and vomited a warm spray of water. A thin trickle ran from the darkness of the pipe, issuing through my hands, hair, flushing me with sobriety. That darkness repulsed me, made my skin ache and crawl with nausea. I staggered toward the light, fought my way out into a rocky shore. Seagulls were honking angrily, fighting over a scrap of meat on the beach. Other seabirds twisted through the foggy air above gray waters. The ocean heaved at my feet. I looked up at the sky and cried. A trucker found me limping along the highway like an abused dog. I didn't struggle when he dragged me to the car. I collapsed limply into his arms and let myself be taken. He rushed me to the nearest hospital. I found out I was 80 miles from Grandma's. I'm in a sterile white place now, a hospital that reminds me so much of that underground nightmare of things that should never see the light of day. I started this account hoping it would bring me peace, hoping it would help me come to terms with the trauma I'd faced. It hasn't helped at all. The police are still looking for the hatch and for Sammy's body. It's been 2 days, and they've found neither. I was hoping normality would return, would burn away the nightmares that have haunted me since I've been back. But it hasn't. When I shut my eyes, I see things I'd seen out of the corner of my eyes in those padded rooms. Unspeakable horrors that belong not in this world, but in a place far beyond it. God save them. It's an empty platitude, but it's all I can offer. God save them,